Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to all of you. We will wait 1 or 2 more minutes to make sure that we have the majority of participants with us, and then we kick it off. So bear with us 1 or 2 more minutes. Okay, 5:03. I think it's time to kick it off. So welcome to all of you. Welcome to all of you that just joined us. Connecting from many different locations this afternoon at different time zones. I know it's 4 and 5 p.m. at some of your locations. Welcome to our webinar today with Randstad, in which we will talk about employer branding. My name is Hannah Olijhoek. I work for the Dutch Chamber here in Commerce in Singapore. I am pleased to welcome you to this webinar today, not only for the members here in Singapore, but also the members of our regional chambers in six other locations. So today we have Vietnam, we have Indonesia, we have the Philippines, Malaysia, and Thailand with us. So I think that's great. Within the ASEAN Dutch Chamber Network, we do work together in order to give more prominence to the ASEAN region for the Dutch businesses. We would like to facilitate a stronger regional network, and this network provides you the opportunity to expand beyond the national borders into the regional market, gaining valuable assistance from the chambers in those respective countries. Today, it is our Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore that have invited one of our valued members, one of our orange members, Randstad. Randstad is the global recruitment and HR services company. And in today's webinar, they will talk about employer branding during and after the COVID-19 pandemic situation. Employees and customers are watching how brands are responding to this global pandemic. Some have been applauded for going the extra mile, while others have to find the delicate balance between business challenges and maintaining their employee brand image. Leaders navigate these unusual times, and it's more critical now than ever before to build trust with employees. We have a 60-minute presentation prepared for you. And during this presentation, Randstad, one of our speakers from Randstad, will talk about the 2020 Randstad Employer Brand Research, a research that they do on a yearly basis. And today, our speaker will talk about why employees choose to stay or to leave, key factors driving talent when they're looking for a new employer, how you can protect and enhance your employer brand, and much more. Very practical. It would be great if you keep your lines muted while we are listening to our speaker. There will be plenty of time for questions and answers during the session and also towards the end of the session. While you are listening, feel free to type in all the questions that you have on the chat, and we will pick up those questions when there is time for questions and answers. And I think it's also good for you to know that we are recording this session. So with that, with those practical house rules, I now have the pleasure to introduce our first speaker, and that's Mark Lee. Mark brings more than 10 years of experience in audit and recruitment, and he is currently the head of client solutions at Randstad. And Mark will now start to introduce himself. So Mark, please take it away.
Thanks for that, Hannah. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark, and I head up the client solutions team here in Randstad Singapore. As you know, Randstad is a global human resource firm, recruitment firm, and think of me and my team as the business development / a key account management team, and I run that space. Employer branding, however, has been a big part of our offering in a sense that we knew early on that it was going to be important, and we actually run an annual research on this. It's one of the world's largest surveys done, independent surveys done in this space, and I thought today would be a good opportunity for me to share that with you. So before I do get into the presentation, please feel free to, as Hannah said, come up with any questions you might have for this, because I do get a lot of questions about employer branding from my clients. If you would like, type it out. We will address them towards the end of the session. And from now to then, hopefully you will find the information that I will share helpful. If that's okay, I will proceed with the presentation. So yes, if you would like to connect with me, there's a QR code on the presentation. Please give that a scan. I'll be happy to have a chat with you post this talk regarding anything to do with talent acquisition, talent solutions, and obviously employer branding as well. Yes. So today, what we'll cover today, we've broken it up into 3 sections for the presentation, and the last section being the question and answer session. So firstly, we will get a little bit into the basics of employer branding, because while it's been around for a long time, there are very differing understandings of what it actually means. And you know what? It's not wrong, because it is still up there for, there's a lot of space for interpretation. But what we have done is that we've kind of tried to settle on a definition for it, but also quantify why it matters to organizations today. In the second section, I will share a lot of our research and the insights we've obtained from this research. And I will share with you how we conduct it, and also the differences between primarily the Singapore and Malaysia market for employer branding, but also pre and post-pandemic research that we found. And the third section, we will offer you some advice in terms of protecting and enhancing your organization's employer brand during a trying time like this. So the question is, what is employer branding? And in the later slide, I'll actually explain to you, I'll try and quantify it for you, and why it matters. In this sense, what is an employer brand? Basically, what we've seen is a huge uptake in interest in employer branding in the last, I would say, nine years since we've done the study in Singapore, 5 years in Malaysia, and actually globally, Randstad has done this research even longer than that. What we've seen is a better understanding of employer branding in the sense how it affects your organization. As you can see from the slide, it embodies your organization's values and cultures. So it actually is a voice for your organization without the parent telling to other people. So that in essence is how important employer branding is. It basically shares information of how it's like to work for your organization, what it stands for, with people that are interested, not just candidates that work for you. So we've seen in the last nine years plus in Singapore, clients have gone from not knowing what employer branding is to today, where we have dedicated personnel and teams set up just to address employer branding. A lot of the MNCs based in Singapore actually have a dedicated headcount that deals with employer branding for the organization, the brand, but to a certain extent, the Singapore companies even have a team set up for that. So a lot of money is going into this. some other organizations have also invested in our research, to ask us to conduct deep dive research for their industries for them. And we are able to do that from a certain perspective and help them out with how to chart their employer branding journey. So that's what we've seen, the evolution of employer brand across the last few years. And at the very start, because of the lack of understanding of employer branding, it was difficult to quantify the effect of employer branding because of the iffiness of what it was. But today we have enough data over the last 9 years plus in Singapore, even taking some from our global research, we're able to quantify the effects of good employer branding. As you can tell from the slides, what we've done is that is look at the effect that good employer brand has on the salaries that an organization pays. So as you can tell, companies that do not have as strong an employer brand and taking everything else to be the same, assuming that everything is a constant, they are overpaying salaries by 10%, i.e. a good employer brand saves you 10% on salaries for when you attract talent. We've also gone out to ask business leaders about their thoughts on employer branding, and to date, 80%, that's a high percentage, 80% of business leaders agree that employer branding is monumental in attracting strong talent. And as you know out there, given the digital revolution, talent is getting harder to attract these days because it's scarce. New technology, it makes it difficult. No one's out there doing a degree in blockchain, for example. So if you want to attract someone like that, you do need good employer branding. Millennials, that's been a big point of discussion across the last few years. But at the same time, a huge portion of millennials do pay attention to employer branding. So that's a big part. If it's part of your recruitment strategy to recruit millennials and the younger generations, employer branding must be a focus for you. And the last point that I want to bring up is your hiring process. With strong employer branding, it actually affects your hiring process and it speeds it up. I think one input that I can have here, speaking to the consultants, is that when we work with organizations with strong employer branding, the consideration time taken on the candidate side reduces significantly because they already know that the organization is one that they want to work for. So a couple of case studies that we want to bring to your attention. Good examples. Firstly, Changi Airport Group. We work quite closely with them. They've won most attractive employer in Singapore one of the years. So as one of the world's top airport hubs, and you know Singapore is famous for that, they really put their employees and customers first. And using this perspective, by putting them first, they are able to build and broadcast a very, very strong employer brand. One thing that they do is taking this passion for service. The people are satisfied, they're happy, and this acts as an advertisement for their employer brand in non-verbal ways. They don't have to go out there and say we have a very strong employer brand. Their employees do that for them. The people that walk through the airport do that for them. So that's the kind of effect a strong employer brand can have for you. There's another thing that CAG, Changi Airport Group, does really well, and is taking into consideration the employee experience. Keep in mind, again, I mentioned before, this doesn't just encompass the current employees. This also covers people that have interviewed, tried out, but were not successful in their interview bid to work for CAG. But knowing that CAG has constructed a very good experience for them, even so that these people act as ambassadors for CAG, even though they didn't get the job, that is a very, very powerful tool. So using that, they're able to expand the candidate pool. People talk to people and they say, you know what, going for an interview with CAG, it's a really great experience. And that really highlights how healthy their employer brand is. So that's in Singapore. On a more global brand, global organization, we have Siemens. So Siemens has done three things really well for employer branding. So firstly, they work from the inside when it's transformations. I know there's a lot of different ways to do transformation. You can get a consulting firm to come in and do it for you. You can get, employ someone that's done it before and come in and do it for you. But what Siemens has done is look internally and start inside. And I think that inclusiveness has built a very strong employer brand for them. So what they did was that they created a culture. The culture prizes curiosity and experimentation, and also fosters an environment that encourages their people to work flexibly with each other, collaboratively. And because of that, it built this sort of impression that people have in Siemens on a global scale. So firstly, that transformation from inside translated into good employer branding, positive employer branding for Siemens. Number two, they invested in 360 engagement. What do I mean by that? It really wasn't just speaking to one group or thinking that your employees are one group of people, just one, just employees. It was looking at them and segregating them and understanding how to speak to each individual group, whether it's segregated by gender, age, it could even be education level, because Siemens is such a big company. It works all the way from the blue collar workers to the white collar workers. So another thing that Siemens did was, with respect to this point, was to conduct events. So university networking sessions. I know a lot of the organizations do that, but taking people by surprise. We've heard stories of Siemens conducting networking sessions in unexpected environments, like an old factory or a nightclub. It really changed the impression of people that people had of Siemens, because it's an old organization. It's been around a long time, and yet with this unexpected shift in embracing new culture, they managed to change people's impressions of them. And lastly, what they did very well was they have a compelling story to tell. They give their employees ample opportunities to share their stories. When people hear stories, it works. People are attracted or affected by other people's stories. So what Siemens did very smartly was allow their employees to share their thoughts with the people that they work with, their stories with the people, their customers and their colleagues. And it helped them to kind of foster, again, a very open culture that in a way is very positive in today's employer branding gradings. So moving on into the next section, we are looking at Randstad Employer Brand Research. What I probably want to do is share with you a little bit about what it is and how we conduct it. So what is the Randstad Employer Brand Research? I call it REBRA for short from now onwards. It basically is a representative research, an independent research, by the way. We actually engage a research company to do it for us. So in that sense, we try to maintain as much independence as possible. This global survey takes into account 185,000 respondents worldwide across 33 markets. In the next slide, I'll share with you which countries actually are covered by this research. But basically, we try to find out what the most important factors are for candidates within these 33 markets. So in essence, the REBRA is a reflection of employer attractiveness for at least Singapore's 75 largest employers. In other countries, bigger economies, we do 150 largest employers by headcount, but in Singapore, we do 75. So I mentioned 33 markets, and these are the countries that we do the REBRA research in. If you're interested in any of them, please approach me. I will put you in touch with the appropriate people in Randstad to be able to kind of share the information with you. But today we will cover Singapore and Malaysia. Those are two countries that we have done. recently, we have done across the last few years. The fieldwork, how it works is a series of online interviews for the respondents in the respective countries. This year's study actually took place between December 2019 and January 2020. Now, why is that significant? It is because it's pre-pandemic. So a lot of the research that I will share with you early on will be pre-pandemic, but you will see that there are trends that have already popped up that are interesting to us, because when we did a mini version of it post-pandemic, you will see that, yes, true enough, these concerns skyrocketed into top priorities post-pandemic. So first off, these are a summary of the top 5 most important things that candidates have represented, they look for in an employer. So i.e. the most important aspects of employer branding for a candidate that's looking to move in Singapore and Malaysia. A quick run through, what you can see is that it is constant across the 2 countries, where salaries and work-life balance matter a lot. In Singapore, the gap is much smaller between the 2. It's only a 4% difference between the 2 versus Malaysia, where you see that it's I would say about 15%. I do think that Malaysia will follow suit in the next few years to come, and you will see the gap between work-life balance being just as important as salaries within these 2 countries. Now, the other point to note here is that there is an underlying want or desire for a company with good corporate financial health. What do I mean by this? If you look at the slide, in Singapore, you have job security coming in at number 3, along with strong management and financial health on the Malaysia side. What this points to for us is that candidates and employees are looking at how healthy an organization is, and that is really important to them. Why is this so? It can translate into a couple of things, right? One, obviously, job stability is there. My company is going to be around for time to come. It is sustainable. But on the other flip side of it, it also translates into more benefits. If a company, let's call them a rich company, with a lot of resources, they are able to provide more for these employees. And what kind of benefits are important to candidates these days? We're looking at gym memberships, work from home allowances, more medical benefits. These sort of things have risen to the forefront as just as important as the employees' salaries. So one thing to note is that if your company is in a good place, good corporate financial health, you will want to let people know that. You will want the perception to be out there, so that people will view your company favorably. Okay. In this slide, one thing that we found is that when we look further down across the top 10 factors in Singapore and Malaysia, the soft benefits matter as much as the harder ones, like salary. So if you look at the Singapore side, you will see the ones with the arrow. That kind of implies a softer benefit, where you have work-life balance, pleasant work atmosphere, and flexible arrangements, etc. Same goes for the Malaysia side. So one thing to know is that it's not just about salaries and benefits anymore. I know that was really important for a big bulk of employees. I would say maybe close to 10, 15 years ago. That was what they wanted. They wanted that take-home pay. But other things have crept to the forefront, I think, because of the mixing of generations. You have the millennials, you have Gen Zs, who are looking at much more than just dollars in their pocket. You're looking at a place that they can look forward to work, and it's just as important to them as salary. So one thing to take note is that, does your employer brand speak of this if it's available? You don't want to go out there and kind of broadcast something where it's not available, because then it is not very representative of that. But if it is, you will want to kind of invest some time, some effort into making sure the perception is out there. Okay, in this slide, what we do is that we compare. We compare what is important to the employee in the left column versus what they think employers do well. So we're able to get this from the Randstad research because the questions that we ask are able to extract what they find important versus what they think these organizations, the top 75 organizations, do well. The biggest takeaway from this is that there is a big disparity between what's important to them and what they think organizations do well. I mean, take an example. When we've highlighted work-life balance, it comes in at number 2 for both Singapore and Malaysia. Unfortunately, it comes in at number 9 and 10 for what these respondents think the companies in Singapore and Malaysia do well. Look, it could be a case of impressions, it could be a case of perception. But unfortunately, in the game of employer branding, perception is reality. So if that's what they think of your company, that's what they're going to go along with. And it could possibly affect the decision whether or not to, one, work for you, or two, to influence their friends whether or not to take up a job with you. So that's something that we found is the biggest gap between employees' wants and their impressions of employers. So I mentioned that the study, the major study of the REBA 2020 was done pre-pandemic. But from what we could see from the results, already before pre-pandemic, people were voicing concerns. They wanted flexible working arrangements, they wanted the ability to work from home, and also they had questions about their healthcare. And you know what, even more so now. One thing that I'm sure all of you who are in the HR space will have noted will be a lot of concern about benefits, a lot of concerns about what medical insurance covers, and also on the flip side, staying safe, staying home. What is the ability to work from home? So that's something that we've noted was already bubbling to the surface pre-pandemic, and it really kind of became apparent post. So another thing that we wanted to share when it came to employer branding was this transition. I know we use the word work-life balance a lot, but as you can see with organizations like Google and Facebook, it's becoming work-life integration, not work-life balance. It's no longer mutually exclusive where you have your work and your play, right? Right now, it's what is the ability to be able to do both seamlessly, but not affecting the quality of either one. So we went out there, we asked the questions, what kind of benefits the employees, the respondents would have found to be desirable outside of the normal medical benefits that they receive. And the slide that you're looking at actually shows some of the results. Additional vacation benefits, that's a moot point now, but this was done pre-pandemic. But you have healthcare, you have flexible working hours over in Malaysia, taking top 2 spots, right? And as well as number 2 and number 3 in Singapore. So you can see one thing that I think organizations will have to consider moving forward is how to integrate this balance of work-life with their employees, because working from home is going to be a new norm right now. What is the balance what is the ideal balance that they should have between working from home and also enjoying themselves from home? Because I'm sure you guys have experience as well, myself included. Working hours seem to be a lot longer from home. The desktop is right there, your laptop's right there. You step away at 6 o'clock, an email comes in, you're gonna do work again. You know, as compared to the actual, there's a formality of leaving the office. There's an actual ending to your work hours, and you hit home previously. So this is something that organizations need to kind of come to grips with. Do we have an answer? We don't, not yet. It's new. We do. I do speak to many clients about this. Some of them actually ask me for guidance, but it really is in a testing transitionary phase right now. It's kind of finding out what works for your company. So does it mean that all of you should go out there offering all these additional benefits immediately? No. I think you do need to take into consideration your company structure and your company culture at the same time before kind of deciding what is suitable for you to look into. Okay, so in the next slide, I mean, like I mentioned, we are in full realization that a lot of the REBA results were pre-pandemic. But at the same time, we wanted to kind of find out whether the respondents' answers changed post-pandemic. So we did a little mini study, and this is the result of that. So pre-COVID, you can tell that those are what I've showed you, the results so far. In Singapore, you can, and this was something that we called quite early into it, job security leapt up on top of attractive salary. And you know what, guys, this is monumental, because in the 9 years that we've done this study, attractive salary has never come in below number 1. It's always been number 1. And yet when we do this survey, you can see how concerned people are with regard to their jobs, whether they will have a job moving forward. Yes, this is unprecedented times, so unprecedented results. Now, same thing happened with Malaysia. So a lot of what this tells us is that right now, if you guys want to put out a message in relation to employer branding, job security would be a really good thing to talk about for your organizations. It will give your current employees a peace of mind, but it will also provide any prospective employees a sense of that you guys are doing well, and it's safe. It will be attractive to join you guys. So I do think job security is very, very important during this time, at least for the next year or so. So one thing that we found out, and then let me explain a bit more that and how this might appear to be in conflict, is that more than 50% in Singapore and Malaysia are still on the lookout for jobs. Now, one thing that we asked at first was, I thought they were concerned about job security at first. Why are they looking for jobs? But actually, it's the same thing. That desire to look for jobs, that drive to look for new jobs actually may stem from job security or worry about job security. If there's an opportunity to find a role or a job that provides them more job security, now that's something that they will jump at. And I think that probably explains why the high percentages have appeared in Singapore and Malaysia. More than 50% are actively looking for new jobs in the next 12 months. That's something that we've seen on the floor as well, not just in our research. We've seen many people move. In fact, just this afternoon, I had a client meeting. The client mentioned to me that she was surprised that a colleague moved during these tumultuous times. But you know what? People are still willing to move for the right conditions. So a jobs concern for job security does not mean that employees will not resign. So other factors to consider. For example, we've read widely about situations where companies have found sustainability an issue. So a lot of our friends, colleagues have taken pay cuts. They've mentioned that bonuses are hard to come by this year. That's going to affect a candidate's desire to look out for more job opportunities, something that they consider better in their books. In the third section, we actually want to share with you a little bit about how to enhance your employer branding. And in this case, how we would do it across 2 slides is probably share with you some positive case studies that we've come across. These are all have been featured in the news, and we do, some of them are our clients, so we had some inside information on how they did it. but also a couple of pointers about what you guys should look out for. So a couple of positive case studies that I thought would be good to share with you would be, in the first instance, a redeployment of their affected workforce. SIA and SETS, for those of you that are not familiar, I think most of you are familiar with Singapore Airlines. Now, obviously, with the travel restrictions, it's been heavily affected. Their staff have been heavily affected. Pilots, stewards, all their service staff have been affected. But what they've done is redeploy them to work in other areas that require manpower. Nursing homes, essential services where you have e-commerce and retail. They actually provided training as well for their staff to be redeployed there. What this has translated to for them was that while SIA and SETS have been heavily impacted, and usually this comes with a negative perception because of their efforts in doing this, the perception of how they've handled the pandemic and how it's affected their employees is positive. They've actually come out to kind of invest time, effort, money in making sure that their staff are taken care of. In Randstad, we actually have RiseSmart, an arm that looks into this space, and while they're pretty new in Asia, in Europe, they're in America, they're being utilized heavily for retraining. Employers are looking at it and going, I have 100 guys or 200 guys that need to be reskilled, and they've asked consultants, external people to come in and help with the reskilling. So yes, it does require a little bit more effort and investment, but it does translate into exponential returns for your employer branding. So case study 2, we're looking at two local banks in Singapore. DBS is Singapore's largest bank. UOB is also one of the largest banks in Singapore. What they've done is they introduced a job sharing scheme. That's DBS. They've introduced a job sharing scheme where one role can be performed by 2 people. So this means, well, a couple of things. One, 2 people get to keep part of their jobs, even though, let's say, headcount is lost. 2 people get to keep at least half of their jobs. But also what they've extended to these 2 people is the full share of medical insurance, medical benefits, and coverage. So also this required a little bit of investment from DBS as part. This means this also impacted them in a positive way, right? DBS is being looked upon as very looking after their employees in that sense. What this has also done is provide the employees flexible work arrangements, the ability to work from home. As you know, within the financial services space, sometimes working from home is a little bit more difficult given the regulations. But DBS has taken the effort, as well as UOB, in offering the ability, in UOB's case, 2 days a week to work from home, so that they can employees have better control over their work-life balance or work-life integration, like I mentioned earlier. So again, kudos to these 2 organizations, very well done. And lastly, I talked about training and upskilling. I talked about training and reskilling. In this case, what Grab has done is super interesting, right? They've helped to upskill their drivers. For those of you, again, that don't know, Grab is a ride app. I'll consider them a tech company that provides people the ability to book rides with drivers. So in essence, there are Grab drivers out there that act as independent drivers. But what Grab has done is offered these drivers the opportunity, and they've partnered with Microsoft to upskill themselves to pick up tech skills. And as you know, I mentioned digital revolution is out there. Tech skills are super in demand. That's something that Grab has very kindly offered to their drivers, because if you think about it, the drivers might not have had the opportunity to work or to be trained by Microsoft by themselves. So in essence, Grab has given them that opportunity to do so. So these are 3 areas or 3 case studies of really good employer branding and activities that that organizations have done in Singapore to really improve the public's perception of them, even in this very trying times, and even in an area like Singapore Airlines and SATS, where it's heavily impacted. There are things that you can do to really make a positive impact on that. Okay, so in this slide, what we want to do is share with you 3 areas we think that you can take note to improve or rather manage your employer brand during the pandemic. Firstly, research. Yes, you don't want to head into it blind. You want to know what you need to do. You know, if you don't know what you don't know, you can't really do anything effective. In this case, what we say is that look at the short-term needs of your employees. Are you meeting their immediate needs for working from home? Are they well provided for? Wi-Fi, laptops, etc. Also, how about this split ops thing where they return to work? Have you implemented safety measures in the office? Have you provided work from home allowances, etc.? These are really short-term things that you can consider, where if you meet them, it's a quick win for you guys when it comes to employer branding. When you look at longer term, you're looking at mapping your human capital. You're planning the development, right? Are there opportunities for your staff to grow and evolve with this new norm? Are things being held largely the same when actually they don't work anymore? So really, it's about planning that roadmap and taking some effort and time to do that before moving on and implementing it. Offer training, offer reskilling, offer upskilling. In the unfortunate case where there is a need to let people go, have a better management of that process. Bring in third-party external experts. Our Rise Smart service, for example, bring them in. They know how to handle the tough conversations. They have networks that will be able to kind of help your affected employees find new work. And that will give you guys a positive employer branding. Secondly, provide support and resources for them. I mentioned that training, really invest in that time, speak to them, make sure that they are taken care of. It's not just, I know there are a couple of cases out there where unfortunately the company just closed down. The employees are left on their own. There is probably a very bad instance of impact on employer branding. Probably didn't have any choice there, but if you do, think otherwise. And lastly, communicate. I think transparent and honest communication. It's easy to do that in this day and age, but the benefit that you get from doing it, even though the news is bad, even though it's a tough message, I do think is appreciated during this time. So be transparent, be honest, but also on another point about communication, get your employer brand out there. I've said many times during the presentation, if it's something that you do, make sure people know about it, because if they don't, it doesn't count for employer branding. So think about how to communicate what you want to communicate in the employer branding sphere. Actually, that brings me to the end of the presentation. There is a QR code on the screen right now. It leads you to our employer branding research website, or rather the page, and then you can find out a lot more. You can put in a request for the country reports for the rebirth, which gives you a lot more insight than just this presentation. So Hannah, I was thinking now would be a good time for Q&A.
Definitely. We have a first question on the chat. So let me start with that question. And to all of you, write your questions on the chat that you would like to address now to Mark. Mark, the first question we just received is in regards to independent platforms like Glassdoor. What do you think about that? And is it a true reflection of the employer brand?
I think the first thing you mentioned about Glassdoor and how effective it really is depends on where you're using it from. Because the culture of where you're using it from affects the how accurate Glassdoor is, and I'll give you an example. I find, at least in Singapore and given the Asian culture, really a lot of things that you find on Glassdoor are negative. And that's something that is inherent in our culture. When we have something negative to say, I'm going to go somewhere and make sure someone knows that I have something bad to say. And yet when it's positive, people are not really motivated to put that up. So the effectiveness of Glassdoor, we find, at least in Singapore, it's quite limited. But if you look at it, when it comes to, I would use Western economies, America, for example, I do think it's quite accurate. People are willing to go on and broadcast how good their employers are. You might have an instance in Singapore for organizations telling their own employees to go on Glassdoor and kind of share. Now that would be kind of a good thing. But generally, we find the effectiveness of Glassdoor in Asia quite limited.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Miyuki, did you wanted to add something to this, or did you wanted to ask another question? There it comes in. Thanks, Mark. On the desired attributes, do you see a similar trend from students?
I'll add a caveat to that. Firstly, that a lot of our respondents are working. Because we are a recruitment company, we are interested in the working population, but we do cover some students. And what we've seen, at least across the last 9 years, and when we segregate the results by age, is that there is a lot more focus on the softer attributes when it comes to students. It's not so much about salary anymore. They are in a stage where they're just coming out, they're wide-eyed, they're a little bit wary of the places that they work. So attributes such as pleasant work atmosphere, that ranked the highest for the youngest age group in our research this year. It is pleasant work atmosphere. So if you think about it, if they're concerned about something like that, they're going to be looking for attributes like good training. They're going to be looking at attributes like strong leadership, where they can get guidance. So yeah, when it comes to the younger ones, I do think the focus is more on softer attributes.
Great, thank you. There are no other questions on the chat at this moment. Feel free to unmute your line and use your microphone if you would like to ask a question. That's also fine.
Hi, Mark. I just wanted to ask very quickly, first of all, some great content there. Thank you for sharing and taking us through it. Would those slides be available to public, or it's just for your own kind of usage only?
So I'm not sure about this set of slides, but the QR code that if you scan that in, that's still on the screen, you're able to get the slides in the form of a country report for Singapore and Malaysia. What the QR code does is sends you to our website, and you actually kind of link up with our marketing team, or my team, client solutions team, and we'll actually send that report over to you. In fact, we could even set up a separate time to bring you through in detail, because the country report has a lot more information in there. This is just a condensed version.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, because it's indeed two main markets, Singapore and Malaysia, and some really relevant and adequate information there that we could use as well as an organization. Some good research as well was done.
Thank you. I think in relation to that, in APAC, we also have the study in Australia, China, India, and Japan as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Welcome.
And Mark, this slide deck, I think it would be really nice to share with the participants afterwards.
Yes, no problem. Yeah.
I think that's really nice. We also recorded the session, so we could perhaps also share the recording afterwards for anyone that's interested. Okay, are there additional questions? Type them on the chat, or unmute your line.
Hello, this is Miyuki again. Thank you so much for the content. It's really helpful. Would you mind to share a bit more on the cases of Siemens? I want to understand, how do they incentivize employees to share those stories? Because I think often in the case we want them to share, but there's no incentive for them to do that. So if there's any insights around that, I would love to know.
Okay, there are a couple of ways you can do that. And I think you're right. Sometimes if you just offer them the portal, right, to do it, they kind of like portal their way around, and it's a bit difficult to kind of get people to kind of participate in that. But I think one thing that we can, I've heard that they do is kind of, they kind of identify certain people who have strong stories and have that sort of participative character, and they zero in these people. So I think that's one thing that you can do. If you can identify people who want to do that, definitely target them. We actually have a similar internal exercise at the moment, where Randstad is 60 years old, and we have a portal to upload our stories into that, and I've been asked to do it, and a couple more colleagues have been asked to do it. So that's one more targeted approach that you can do it. But one thing that I probably want to do, Miyuki, is because there's a lot of detail that goes into the rest of what they did. I want to say there is a standing out report that we do. And when I mentioned standing out report, it actually details what Siemens did really well, and when it comes to employer branding. So my marketing team is kind of telling me that we can send it through to you if you really want to know the details of how to encourage your workforce in sharing their stories, and then what kind of resources you need to provide them with in order to make sure it's successful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. I'm looking at the chat. No other questions for now. We can take one or two more questions, looking at the time. So, Sahil, we can't hear you.
Yeah, the mic's off.
I see that you are unmuted, but we still can't hear you.
Maybe if you typed it into the chat group. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's an impromptu game of charades.
Thanks, Sahil. Mark, I will just read it out loud. It's interesting that even though high salary and benefits is the top focus, quite a lot, not all, of the employees leave organizations because of organizational cultures. Any thoughts on this from your side?
You're 100% right. I think what we've seen is a movement away from salaries being the primary reason. Well, it will still be one of the reasons why people move. But when our consultants speak to people, candidates in Singapore, and we always ask about the reason for leaving, usually it's no longer just salary. It's about, I'm not being engaged. I'm not receiving enough exposure. I feel that I've been siloed. So really the focus of candidates and employees across the last few years, I would say, has been shifting. I won't say that it's no longer with salary, but it basically is taking into account whether or not there are cultural fits for them. People are more concerned about how their own personal values sit together with the company's values. There's a lot more emphasis on that these days. So it's something that, organizations do need to be not wary of, but in knowledge of. It's something that you need to engage. It's all about engagement. Engage your workforce on different levels. It's not enough to just pay them good salary these days.
That was a thumbs up. So I think that was a good answer. Thanks, Mark. All right. We have time for one more question. No more questions? Okay, Sahil, thanks. Were there any surprises for you, for yourself in the report?
Oh, I don't think it was a surprise given how impactful the pandemic was, but I never expected at any one point, if things were constant, that salary would no longer be number one. So that's why I mentioned earlier how worried, or rather how much impact that must be. This whole situation has had on people. For job security, jump from number 6 in Malaysia's case, or number 3 to number 1, because salary has always been a priority for any, I would think, any economy, especially what we found in our studies in Asia. As you know, in Asia, a lot of our priority does revolve around money. So that's something that we've seen year in, year out across all the countries that we've done in Asia. Salary is a standout number 1. For it to be seen as for it to be kind of dethroned by something else is monumental for me, at least having done this study 9 years in a row. So that was a surprise. Other than that, really, the trend that I will take note of, the second thing would be that shift away from the harder attributes to the softer attributes, because my generation's kind of caught in the middle. My parents were all about the hard attributes: work hard, stay with a firm 20 years, keep your head down, and work your way out, right? And then on the flip side, I speak to friends and some of the younger friends. It's really the priorities lie elsewhere. It's no longer about sustainability. It's no longer about putting your head down. It's about feeling engaged at the workplace. So that's the number 2 kind of trend, that, not surprised, but trend that I've noticed across the last few years.
Thanks, Mark. All right, it's nearly 6 o'clock here in Singapore, and time is flying. We will provide you with the contact details of Mark, so should you wish to follow up, then you can reach out to him. We will also follow up with the additional information that was just shared on the screen with the QR code. So that will follow afterwards. I would like to say thank you to you, Mark, for sharing all the knowledge that you have. I think you can talk for much longer about this topic. It was great to listen to you. So thanks to you. And thanks to our participants for joining us this hour. Wish you all a lovely evening, and hope to see you in one of our next ADCN webinars anytime soon. So once again, thank you, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.